All right, my people, how na day within the sub. Bawoni, Kedu, Akwaba, Nagwo day. Let's get into this video because we're going to talk about something I think we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks now as it relates to the IMF. This brother that I'm going to review today I believe, is one of the sharpest minds out here. He has a good understanding of what's going on in Africa as it relates to IMF death trap. He talks about what's happening in Kenya, which is IMF's making. I mean, we all know this. But more importantly, what he talks about in this video, and I want you to pay attention to, is that Africans are focused and fighting the wrong person. And that the real enemy here is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And that's the real enemy. And that's what we need to focus on. And I want to review this video, and I don't want to waste any more time because there's a lot to cover in this video, and we're going to have a very good conversation and discussion around the events that are happening in Kenya, around the events that are happening in Africa to keep Africa on its knees. And I want to get right into it. So let's get into it and have a good conversation, okay?
Well, the situation in Kenya with the protests. Well, first of all, we'll say that the president of Kenya has long been regarded as a Western client, if not a puppet. And that's not without reason. He has regularly ingratiated himself with the West. He has been pursuing neoliberal economic policies within Kenya that have made the lives of the people increasingly miserable. And so this has resulted, predictably, in protests that began peacefully and turned violent because of the police. The police shot at peaceful protesters. Now, they're calling for the removal of the president of Kenya, William Ruto. Now, what I would say about that situation is that it's similar to the situation before it in Sudan, and it's similar to the situation before Sudan in Egypt, where the people are protesting against the government for policies that the government is implementing, which the government is held hostage to implement in favor of multinational corporations and international lenders, chief among them the International Monetary Fund. In fact, the bill that stirred the protests in Kenya initially is basically an IMF bill, a structural adjustment reform, an austerity measure that is being demanded by the IMF of the Ruto government. So my opinion, as was my opinion with regards to Sudan, when Omar Bashir was being blamed for the economic policies that were the austerity measures, the austerity economic policies, the neoliberal policies that he was implementing under coercion in Sudan, and the protests against Sisi because of the neoliberal policies that he was implementing under coercion. My position has always been that these leaders, these politicians, exist to take the blame for the policies that they're implementing on behalf of private sector power.
So did you get that? I think that was very clear, and I think I agree with him. Because a lot of us, and I've said this in past videos, that our leaders who are puppets, who went and laid with the likes of the West and the IMF, really backed themselves into a corner and their countries into a corner. So what he's saying is that these leaders, the moment they go to bed with the likes of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the West, they're locked in forever. And they've become hostage to these institutions as well as the countries. And so many times they're forced and coerced to put in place policies that benefit the IMF at the detriment of their countries, which is why Kenyans are revolted against that whole tax bill. That tax bill was an initiative of the IMF. That was a condition, and I covered it in my past video when I talked about this. That was a condition for Ruto if he is going to get more loans from the IMF. And so a lot of times what we don't see is that a lot of these corporations are the ones that really push some of the hardship that we suffer in our countries through our leaders. That's what he's saying. That is what he's saying. Okay.
That's why they exist. That's why I call them effigies. Because they exist to implement the policies that will make them unpopular, and then they'll take the brunt of the unpopularity. They'll take the brunt of public anger. And then they'll be removed, but the policies will remain. Because the source of the policies is the private sector, is the international private sector. It's the OCGFC. It's the Western multinational corporations and lenders, financial institutions, and so forth. Again, specifically, the International Monetary Fund. This is your problem. And now, who is the International Monetary Fund doing what it's doing? Who is it doing it for? It's not doing it for Kenya. We all know that. And it wasn't doing it for Sudan, and it's not doing it for Egypt. So who are they doing it for? And when you identify who they're doing it for, then those are the private sector players, those are the power brokers that it makes more sense to me that the population should be protesting and should.
So you get that. So in other words, our leaders are just a puppet face whom the West know that once they can get one corrupted or get one to be in bed with them, the fall, he mostly will be the one to take the fall. The people are going to revolt against him and not against the real devil and the real enemy behind the decisions that a lot of these leaders who are puppets of the West make. So he's saying that our anger should be focused and should be towards West and IMF, and not necessarily our leaders. Yes, they should don't get me wrong, they should, right, face the consequences of ever going to these types of people to indebt their countries in. We should hold them accountable. But more beyond that is we should also hold these other corporations who are from the Western Europe, who drive a lot of the protests that is currently going on in Africa and have gone on in Africa. These are the ones that we really need to be focused on, more so than the puppets. Because what have we seen in the past? When we have leaders who understand what he's saying, who understand the game that the West plays, these are the ones that they send the economic hitman to assassinate. When we have leaders who nationalize our product and say, hey, no, 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 these are the ones that they take out because these ones understood the game. When we have leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, who is obviously going to nationalize the products and resources of his country, this is why he's had many attempts over his life. So this is a wake-up call for Africa, that while we should hold our leaders accountable forever getting us in bed or our countries in bed with these evil types of people who only want to enslave us economically, we also should focus our anger at the real enemy here, which is in this case, the IMF, the World Bank, the West.
Be directing their activism and their opposition towards those actors on the political and economic scene in Kenya, not the government. Now, I'm not speaking up in favor of William Ruto. There's a lot of problems with his government, certainly, without question. Just as there were problems with the government of Omar Bashir, and there's certainly a multitude of problems with the government of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. But when you're talking about specifically the way that they're managing the economy, you have to understand that they are not the managers of the economy. Their lenders are the managers of the economy, and the lenders are managing the economy in such a way as to benefit Western multinational corporations. So, for example, in Kenya, you should look at Coca-Cola. You should look at General Electric. You should look at Standard Chartered. You should look at Barclays Bank. Look at Safaricom, Nestle, IBM, and look at Toyota. These are the beneficiaries of the economic policies. These are the beneficiaries of neoliberalism.
So in other words, when you see corporations in your country, you should be worried. When you see Western corporations in your country, rather than be all excited about, oh my God, we have got McDonald's in our country, we've got Burger King, we've got IBM, we've got Coca-Cola, rather than be all excited that these people are in your country, you should probably ask, what has your leader given up for these countries, for these companies to exist in your country? Because Coca-Cola isn't in Africa or places in Africa just for the hell of it. They are there because our leader gave up something for them to be there. When you find this corporation, when you find these companies in your country, the question we should be asking, which none of us are asking, is what did our leader or our leaders give up to these corporations from the West? Because it has now been proven now, it's become more clear that these corporations are the ones that are causing the stagnation of African growth. They probably aren't paying the taxes they should be paying. They probably, the land which they built their facilities or infrastructures on, they probably got it at pennies on the dollar. The employees that work in those places, there's probably a corrupt deal that they signed with our government that makes them bring their own people to flourish at the backs of our labor. They probably aren't contributing the way they should be contributing to the success of that city or that place that they're in. So to us, we're all excited. Oh, wow, look, Coca-Cola is in our country. Yes, it's all nice. But when you really look at and dig into the situation with these companies, you find out that they are the biggest pollutants of biohazard in your country. You find out that they're the biggest ones that are causing a lot of environmental nuisance in your country. You find out that a lot of things that they won't get away with in their country, they get away with it in your country. So those are the questions that many of us don't ask, that we should be asking. So no longer should we be too excited when we see these people in our country, because their presence hasn't brought prosperity to us, but it has brought nothing but economic stagnation, enslavement, poverty at our backs.
The ones who are holding the government hostage, and they're doing it by means of the IMF. So your president, and again, whether it's Kenya or whether it's Sudan or whether it's Egypt or whether it's Pakistan and many other places around the world, and increasingly you can say the same thing about countries in Europe, these governments, these politicians are hostages, and the policies that they're implementing are essentially like when you see a hostage being forced to read a list of demands. You don't get angry at the hostage for the demands that he's making on behalf of the hostage taker. And that's what the government does. That's what your president does. That's what your prime minister is doing. They're just reading the list of demands that they have been told that they that must be met in order for them to not be eliminated. And the one that's going to be eliminated here isn't the president, it's your whole economy. Because the IMF has considerable power to sabotage and cripple your economy if you don't do what they say. That's why it's better for you if you never get involved with them in the first place. And this is why I've said time and time again that it's much better for Muslim countries, for countries in the global south, for countries in Africa, to do business with China, to do business with Russia, while they still can, while those countries are still interested in investing in Africa, in the global south, Latin America, and the Muslim world, and so on, while they still have the money to spend, you ought to take the money from them rather than taking the money from the IMF. Because the IMF and Western lenders generally are not actually interested in you paying them back. They don't want you to pay them back. Because when they loan you money, they're calling it a loan, and you think it's a loan, but what they're actually doing is buying you. So they don't want the money back. They want what they bought, which is your whole country.
Boy, that was an eye-opener. That was an eye-opener. And it's a very disturbing fact and the reality of Africa, right? It's a very disturbing fact. And I've said it in my most recent video that China and Russia, right, are a better friend to Africa than what we've had in the West. I even talked about how the propaganda that's been going on in terms of the so-called debt trap that the West has been putting out about the relationship with China and Africa, that China is indebting Africa and all of that nonsense. Okay, these are all propaganda they put out there when this is not even true. And it's just so that they want the public perception to think that China going to Africa is worse than what the West has done in Africa. There's never going to be anyone, let me help you understand this. There's never going to be any other people, in my opinion, that will do worse to Africa than the West and Europe has done to Africa. There's never going to be. Let's count the cost. Slavery. Let's count another one. Economic enslavement. Let's count another one. Diseases and plagues that came to Africa. Who do you think did all of these things? Who? The West and Europe. All the stuff that Africa has had to suffer over the years has been as a result of them. So tell me which country could top that. Tell me which people could top that. And it's so funny that you will still find Africans that will argue this fact. You will find people that will argue this fact. People who have their heads in the sand. Who will tell you stuff like, oh, China is worse. China is horrible. Tell me how China and Russia is worse than what the West has done to your country. Forget the entire African continent. Your own country. You tell me how that tops that. And so a lot of our countries are indebted to IMF because, as he said, the leaders, the one mistake that our leaders made was to be in bed with the IMF. So once you go to them for the first time without loan and entice you, you become a slave. If you try to get out of this, they're going to try to take you out. They've got the power. The IMF is a vicious mercenary organization. You know, like they got mercenaries. The economic hitman. Have you guys heard about the book Confession of the Economic Hitman? That was a very popular book that came out years ago. And the gentleman that wrote the book was talking about how they will go to countries and cripple the countries. These people work for the IMF. They work for them. I mean, think about the movie Mission Impossible, played by Tom Cruise, the character Ethan Hunt. Who do you think he worked for? He's the economic hitman for the IMF. Even while it's a great movie and we enjoy the movie and the whole action pack, that's exactly who that is. His whole character is about being a hitman for the IMF. They're a vicious organization. So he's saying that it'll be better for Africa not to deal with them in the first place. Because once you deal with them, they will death trap you. And then they'll tell you that it's for your own, they're trying to help. They've got all this propaganda. They're trying to help your country. They have all of these nice, fancy things they put on their website, economic growth, corporate initiatives. Nonsense. And the whole goal is to indebt your country with so much loan that your country cannot pay back the loans. So they can come and take your country's minerals. Because these loans are not meant for you to pay back. They're meant for you to default. And so when you compare that to the loans that China is giving to Africa at low interest rates, most of you still argue that China, because you get your head in the sand. They love to see black people use and push those propaganda out there because, they can just get a few dumb ones who talk out of their butts. They don't know what they're talking about. And they're talking about China is over there indebting Africa. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? These are the ones that love their oppressors. They want the oppressors to keep indebting them. So they'll rather the oppressors to indebt them than the person that never oppressed them. This man just said that it's better for Africa to go to China and Russia. Did I not just talk about this in my past video? Than taking money from the IMF. Did I not just cover this? Because people who spend time to study the situation, know the game that's going on. People who don't know what they're talking about will come on panels and go on and talking nonsense. China is not perfect. There's something in for them. They want something. Of course, they're not doing it for free. They're not giving Africa the loan for free. Of course, they want something. What China is looking for is that Africa will vote for them in the UN Council. That's what they care about. That's why they're giving out the loans. So there's something for them. And what they're looking for is that Africa will vote with them. That is the so-called debt trap that most of you are using to say that China is over there indebting Africa. Do you understand this? And so a lot of the protests that we've seen and will continue to see in our countries, is as a result of IMF is behind it. You talked about Egypt, you talked about Sudan, we see Kenya. There's many who are going to have economic protests against their economic situation that their puppet leaders went and signed them for. And so they're the face that we go after, while the real enemy is the IMF and the West, the United States. So they will allow us have our Pan-Africanism. They'll allow us to talk all that stuff. The moment we begin talking about nationalizing, if you look at all the people that got assassinated, Gaddafi, the president of Togo, Burkina Faso, many of our leaders, what was so common about these past leaders? They were trying to nationalize their products. That is a no-no because it cuts the corporation in the West off. They don't like that because we invited them in. Okay? So the next time you see a white person, a white woman in your village, right? Next time you see a white person in your village, you want to ask, what is she doing in your village? Next time you see a white man in your village, ask, what is he doing in your village? That's the question you want to ask, rather than be all excited that they are in your village or they're visiting your country. Ask why they're there. What does your village got that they are so interested in? Why are they coming to a hut, a place with muddy roads, They're there because they found something. And the person you want to direct your question to is your leader, your chief, or the head of your village. Like, why is he or she here? Because what will a white person be doing in a remote part of an African village? They found something. They found something, and they are working with your leader to gain access to that at your backs and at your detriment. It's never going to trickle to your people, to the people in that village. It's going to bring pollution. It's going to bring disaster. Look at the oil spillage that Nigeria has been suffering in the Delta area in Nigeria. Look at what Shell caused. Look at what Shell Corporation caused to Nigeria and the people. They're drinking polluted water. They're drinking polluted water, oil water, spillage. The people in the Delta area in Nigeria are dying, and they've died. Many have died. They don't care. They don't care because they paid some corrupt politician to get access to that place. Under the guise that we're going to bring wealth and job. That's usually how they sell it. And Nigeria's economic situation hasn't increased. The country has fallen even more into more poverty. And you find this in many African countries. Nigeria is not the only one. You find it in Ghana. You find it in Ivory Coast. You find it in Kenya. You find it in South Africa. South Africa. You see, when I think of South Africa, and I love my South Africans, South Africa really needs to be worried because all this talk about South Africa being an economic place, you find them. You find the likes of Netflix and all these people talk about, oh, South Africa is such a viable place and we're so excited. You should be worried. You should be worried. When they choose your country, you should be worried. Because they're not going to bring growth to your country. They're not interested in Africans' liberation. They're not interested in providing jobs for Africans to be liberated, to be economically strong. They're not interested in that. When was the last time you saw any white corporation really better the lives of black people without some strings attached that makes you wish that you never took that deal? When was the last time you saw? So you got to be worried. You see, this is situations like this that make me respect China for putting a blockade on Western corporations in the country. See, they're fighting to go to that country. See, the Chinese government doesn't play. Google, the iPhone, Apple, Tesla, all these companies are fighting to go to China. The Chinese government don't play. They're not about to go to China and do what they do in Africa, in China. They're not about to. They don't play. They have to answer and agree to the terms of the Chinese government, the Chinese people, because they don't play. They don't play. And so when most of us, and what we hear about China is that, oh my goodness, China is such a dictator. They've cut their people off the world. See, that's a nonsense they sold us. That's a nonsense. And the Chinese people, over 1 billion people, if you go over there, they're happy that they don't have Western corruption in their country. They're happy. They're not corrupted and indebted to the West as Africa is. They're happy. So the way it's sold to us that, oh my God, China is blocking these people. Look at your country that you open up to the West. How is that helping your situation? Your country and your place that you opened up to take their values, to take their situation. How does that help your country economically? How? You go to China, it's not everything is in Mandarin. They don't have English over there. Everything is in Mandarin. You go to Russia, same thing. Everything is in Russian. They don't have English over there. They gatekeep their country. They do it on purpose. Go to the East. Go to Dubai. Go to the Arab countries. They gatekeep the West out of their country. They do this on purpose. These are people that have studied the West. They know what they're capable of doing. But no, leave it to Africans. Leave it to black people. Oh my goodness. When white folks come to our country, oh, that must mean something for us. Yeah, look at you. And look at what's going on. Look at what's going on. Anywhere you find them, right? When they go on vacation to many of our places, any black country, those countries are indebted, they're in poverty. They're in straight poverty. Look at Jamaica. I love my Jamaican place. I love my Jamaican brothers. You find white people, we'll go to Jamaica. They love going to Jamaica. Yeah, they love going to Jamaica. And in Jamaica, when they were colonized, there was a covenant that has been put in place that Jamaicans can't get out of it, where it prevents the Jamaicans locals from utilizing their own beaches to make money for themselves. Those beaches in Jamaica that you go to is owned by the resorts, which are owned by white people. So they have a covenant in place that cuts the Jamaicans off from ever getting access to their own beaches. Of course, when you go to Jamaica, you just have all these people. Oh, we love to go to Jamaica. Jamaica is a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place. But when you go to Jamaica, you'll find it's a divide. It's a two world. The resort, and when you get out of the resort, you find the poverty of our Jamaican brothers and sisters, how they live in abject poverty. Because their government signed a covenant with the devil. Take any African country that they love to go on vacation. The same thing. Cape Verde in Africa is another one. They love to go there. The island over there. There's a straight poverty in that country. Wherever they go, they bring death, especially when it comes to black people. They're not helping the economic situation of our countries. But it cause wars and cause a lot of protests, a lot of destabilization at our backs, at our own backs. Now, what's the way out for Africa? And I'm going to close. The way out for Africa is that Africa should begin today, right? Begin harnessing its agriculture and its minerals that it has and trade within each other. That's your way out. These fights that Africans are having with each other, where you can't travel from one Africa to another African country without a visa, to me is the most stupid thing I've ever heard of. Where you can't trade, have a free trade, is the dumbest thing. Black folks are their own enemies of their own progress. Black folks. Why can't Africans go to different places and trade with each other without visa, without the restrictions? Why? Because if we took away the barriers of trade, we can then harness our agricultural sector. We have food in Africa. We can trade amongst each other and generate revenue within the continent to where we don't need to go borrow money from the IMF. That is a solution for Africa. But why Africans have not done this, I don't get it. The AU has been a disappointment. Has been a disappointment. Has not really achieved these borderless Africa. ECOWAS, a disappointment. A real disappointment. And so we have Africans who are cutting themselves off at the knees, who are cutting themselves off from their own economic freedom and liberation, when they can actually solve their problem, food problem. They can solve it today. Poverty, Africa can solve that. Because Africa has all the minerals. All they have to do is harness their own minerals and trade with one another. There's enough money in Africa, even with its economic situation, but they can come out of this whole thing. But no, you will leave it to corrupt leaders who, the moment they get into that position after they win election, the first phone call they get is from these Western colonizers. Hey, Mr. President, congratulations for winning the election. Here's what we're going to do. And they begin to become in bed with them. You can't say no to a white person. You can't say no. No. Yeah, you can. Ibrahim Traore said no to them. And he's doing just fine. So I hope Africa gets to a place where we wake the hell up. Because the answer to our own liberation is in our hands. The answer to our own freedom, it's in our own hands. Rather than be mouthpiece for white people and push their own propaganda that they push against the relationships that we're forming with other people other than themselves, rather than be the mouthpiece for them. How about you see that they have been the one that caused your demise for years? What have they done for your country that you're speaking so highly of for them? What have they done for you and your country? For you as a people? That you're over there defending white people and their corporation in your country. So I hope we get to a place where we free our minds and understand who the real players and the ones that are causing our demise, who they are really. Because we're misaligned and we're looking at the wrong thing. And I hope we get there. Thank you all for watching. Please like the video, share the content, subscribe to the channel. Nu vill jag kunna ge tillbaka allt jag inte kunna ge förut. Det finns ingen annan där som kan stå här by my side, oh why. Sättet du rör på det får mig att dö för dig baby. För de här yardis, de vill ju bara dra ner oss. Men du är fett och vanlig. På det jag lägger all min tid. Jag vill ha dig. Du får mig känna safety.